Hey, this video is just to summarize the February patch notes for EVE Online. The changes are already on the live server, so you should already see these changes affecting gameplay, especially the source of ships you see being used out in the wild. First, I'll go over some of the miscellaneous changes, then module changes, then finally the changes to ship hulls. Starting off, any LP that you farm from PvE or PvP activities can now be transferred from Corporation to character and back. Sadly, this still doesn't let you transfer from player to player to make selling LP easier. This will probably lead to even more corps and alliances ripping off new bros through LP buyback schemes, the same way that they've been known to do with all buyback schemes. Secondly, it is now possible to preheat modules whilst in Jump Cloak. This means that when you jump into a gate camp, you can now preheat your micro warp drive so that the first cycle of your module is heated, increasing your chance of surviving greatly. This change seems great, reducing the frustration when roaming without having scouts ahead of yourself or your fleet, avoiding some instances of dying with no ability to avoid the loss. Ships can now autopilot through Answer Black's gates, a straight quality of life change for block pilots, as well as laser crystals no longer popping up in the Repair All button in stations, reducing lag when opening the repair window for pilots with many modules and ships in a singular station. Next, we're onto the weapon systems. First are the Entropic Disintegrator changes. Entropic Disintegrators now have a 20% lower base damage, but have an increased damage multiplier per cycle. What this means is that your max spool when flying Trigavian ships will be the same, but you will start with even less damage than before. This will push underused platforms like the Dragovac, Negatirsa, and the Nurgle into absolute obscurity, but will also knock down the overused Vedmak. The Nitros remain unaffected by this change though, cementing their supremacy in Dreadnought fleet fights. An unfortunate position to be in if you enjoyed the defensive nuke power of the Vedmak, as its gun now lets it down. Onto Rapid Light Missiles. This weapon system has dominated the game for a very long time. Previously, the Cerberus used to be used to outright hard counter every single roaming gang, but since this rework, blobs have moved on to Caracals and Osprey Navies instead. Now, all hulls are stripped of their Rapid Light Missile range buffs, aside from Modu's Legion ships and combat battlecruisers. Notably, the Caracal, Osprey Navy, and Onyx will no longer be able to outright nuke smaller size ships, especially with the light missile's high alpha strike damage. They still remain great screening ships due to their application, but will just be able to project less. This may result in more frigate and destroyer gangs roaming around, although with the proliferation of the projection meta, turreted ships, even of battleship size, are able to apply just fine to small ships from range, which likely means that beam retribution gangs and similar comps still won't see the light of day as they have in previous years. Finally, onto changes to the ships. We start with Marauders that are seeing a warp speed reduction from 3.5 to 3 AU per second. The intent is to increase the amount of time that gangs can exist in hostile space before being decimated or forced off grid by a Marauder response. In reality, the ability for a Marauder to get on grid quickly isn't determined by warp speed, but Titan bridges and Answer Black's jump gates. This change will not affect gameplay in their intended capacity at all, other than likely resulting in Marauders now landing on stations where their aggression time has expired into the safety of tether, where they previously did so less often. Black Ops ships now have correctly received a 7.5 times bonus to cloaked speed instead of a 6.5 times bonus, affixed to a previous coding oversight. The cloaked speed of a Black Ops ship is so high that this minor bonus will have no real gameplay effect most likely, although it's nice to see bugs being fixed still. A huge change for small gang fleets, all field command ships, the Absolution, Nighthawk, Astarte and Sleipnir, are seeing a 50% command burst range that was previously removed from the hulls. This makes these ships a lot more viable in small gangs now, as previously any links placed on these platforms would only apply to themselves due to their short range most often than not. These links changes are compounded by further changes to the Astarte and Nighthawk hulls. First, the Astarte now sees a 10% instead of 7.5% bonus per level to armor repair amounts. Given how strong the Brutix Navy is, and how much more expensive the Astarte is, this barely makes the Astarte any more appealing to myself personally, but will help give the Astarte a bit more use. The Nighthawk, being such a dominant ship, especially in wormholes, is seeing a big reduction in damage and a minor increase in kinetic missile damage. The overall result is a lowering of DPS and a harder lock into kinetic missiles. This is intended to reduce their dominance primarily in wormhole space, and allows opposing fleets to hard counter them through fitting kinetic resistance mods, and using hulls with high kinetic resistance. The notion of being hard-counted due to damage type locks after a long form-up and being forced to either die or dock doesn't seem particularly fun, although knocking down the Nighthawk from its previous dominance is welcomed. The Exec Navy, a pretty dominant ship due to its combination of range, speed and DPS, is seeing a 20% damage bonus per level instead of a 25%. Given how strong the hull was previously, it will likely still see use into the future, even after the changes, where it previously was at the top of Z-Kill due to its abundant usage. This change, alongside the Vedmak nerf, results in a big power reduction in solo and small gangs, as the two staple ships see lower power levels. The Bellicose is finally getting a buff after a long period of underutilization, but only through a 20 meters per second velocity buff, and increasing the power grid from 700 to 780. This still makes the Bellicose entirely too thin to exist in fleet fights, and likely does nothing to help it even when running solo or in small gangs, as non-range bonused cruisers just get torn apart by marauder spam and blobs, T1 hulls especially so. T1 cruisers in general are simply outclassed by Navy cruisers for a very minor price increase, which further doesn't help the Bellicose's current situation even after this buff. Anybody looking for a TP bonused E-War ship should likely just stick with the Hyena for the time being. Finally, the Republic Fleet Firetail, the least used faction frigate out of the 4 empires, is seeing a slight bonus to its weapon systems with a 5% fall-off per level. Given that the RFF is largely just a Navy Comet but worse, this change is nice to see, as at least it now may be able to take on its direct competitors a bit better by potentially outranging them, where it previously had to come in close, where it would simply be outtraded by the more capable hull of the Comet and the better control of the Hookbill. These are all of the changes in the February Havoc balance patch. Thanks for watching and happy hunting.